Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. This week, we are planning on having author Guy P. Harrison join us. We're having some difficulties getting connected with him, and I think there may have been a miscommunication on my end for scheduling. I heard from him just this morning, but we have not been able to get him. So don't be surprised if we get a rather sudden interruption in the call, because if he does sign into Skype, we're going to immediately pull him in because we'd love to get this interview going. Guy is the author of three books, the fourth one on the way. The first one that he wrote, and the one that got me to know him, is 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God. And what I like about the way that he approaches these things is he does not talk about the deep theological questions that only scholars really care about. He interviewed thousands of people to ask them, why do you believe in God? And they gave him their honest answers. And he compiled a list from there and used that to address the reasons that people give. Things like, well, anything is better than being an atheist. And I've got to tell you, that one's been thrown at me before. And even by people that I love, like, well, can't you? It'd be better if you believed in something. I don't care if you're Buddhist or if you go Muslim. They still believe in God, and I mean, that's a legitimate argument that does get thrown at us, and I love the way that he addresses them without going in any sort of condescending notion or any condescending manner. And he takes them at face value and talks about them as they are with frankness and clarity. And frankly, it takes about 2.5 to 3 pages on average for him to do that. His next book is one that it's a little bit outside of the scope because it focuses on a very specific area, but that is Race and Reality. The title is Race and Reality: What Everyone Should Know About Our Biodiversity. He's very emphatic about the issues of race relations and really the human misconception that races exist at all in the way that we think of them. But that one I have not had the opportunity to read yet, and it's very specific, and he touches on it in his next book, which I have right here, 50 Popular Beliefs That People Think Are True. I've got this one all annotated because I have to say this is one of my favorite things. I'm going to read a quick passage here. One of the greatest things I have ever written about skepticism. It says, in my opinion, there is no choice but to speak out against irrational belief if one has any concern and compassion for fellow humans. It doesn't require being mean or obnoxious about it, but silence is not an option. Belief in paranormal and pseudoscience claims is a chronic crisis that burdens us century after century. Those who do understand the damage caused by these beliefs every day around the world would be heartless monsters if they chose to do and say nothing. This is a matter of compassion for fellow humans and a belief that our world could be better if it were not so blinded and hobbled by superstition and unscientific thinking. I'm not being mean and heartless when I explain to someone why alternative medicine is dangerous or how faith healers fool people. Keeping quiet would be mean and heartless. I know when I had Troy Roberts as my guest a while back, we spent an entire show talking about, is it ethical for me to do what I do and trying to deconvert people, to devangelize, as I call it. And Guy talks about that, I think, beautifully in that passage. And he covers in this book a huge amount of other ones. There's another book out that is 50 questions for every Christian that just systematically goes through things that every Christian, if you've not been asked these questions, they're probably worth thinking about and coming to the conclusions on your own that you can in those things. And of course, he has an upcoming book as well. That one really wraps it all together and explains to everybody why he does what he does. The book is called Think: Why You Should Question Everything. So I'm excited. I'm hoping he signs in and we can get the opportunity to have a chat. But I feel that I may have miscommunicated time. We have a significant time zone difference between us. So I hope that we can get that worked out, or we can get the show rescheduled. So in the meantime, we still obviously have my amazing co-host, Bob Greaves. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. I was wondering, in his absence, then maybe you'd like to go through some of those questions that he thinks that would be good to ask a Christian.
Oh, that would be fun. I have it pulled up right here. So
Sure.
there's a handful of them that it starts off in a slightly adversarial note. With the very first one is, does Christianity make sense? And I think that that's one that we can skip by, because two questions down later is the one that I think is even better. Is it rude to ask? And I wanted to see what your opinion is on that. Is it rude to ask somebody, does your belief make sense?
I don't think it's rude at all. I think that, although I would certainly disagree with some of the things that you already said that he claimed, I think he's overgeneralizing that, and I would have to agree that there's a great deal of inappropriate license taken by people who are believers in terms of the degree to which they can go with it. But I don't think we can overgeneralize. When people are doing things that are bad and dangerous, I think we can find other ways of dealing with it, like even the business with alternative medicine. Uh, you know, uh, there's science that we can rely on for determining what genuinely works. And unfortunately, that question is even further perturbed by the fact that the medical industry isn't always honest about its science either. This is not to really question science at all, but is certainly to question the integrity of human beings who unfortunately sometimes have access to certain scientific data and studies that other people don't, and so we're kind of at the mercy of the way that they're interpreting it. But is it rude to ask? No, I think that if people are going to believe something, I think they, and if they're going to express it, I think they need to be able to give some sort of an answer and be held accountable for what it is they think and they believe, particularly if it's going to affect their behavior.
I absolutely agree, and I have to tell you that I've been told that asking is impolite, it's insulting, it's wrong, that it's um, inappropriate. And admittedly, there's times when it might not be
Yeah.
appropriate, but um,
Yeah. Well, of course it's wrong. It's going to make them think.
I
They
just
don't want to
cannot
do that.
imagine
I
how
mean, that's the
challenging an
truth.
idea
A lot
can
of
possibly be
religious
wrong.
mentality is used by people as a shortcut to something they want to have a grasp of that is beyond them.
We
And
have to recognize, though, that it is within the framework of most religions that questioning that religion is a morally abhorrent thing to do.
oh yeah,
That
I mean, some religions have even, it's a capital offense.
indeed.
To,
So it's
yeah,
not just, is it rude to ask? Yes, that's the rather modern day Christian understanding, is that we don't kill people for that, but we also need to recognize that
yeah,
the religion itself says yes, yes it is, and that's why
yeah.
these questions need to be addressed. And I think every Christian should ask themselves those questions, because
I can't.
if you're looking at the well, no, it's not rude to ask. You can ask me why I believe what I believe, and then you're still saying that you ascribe to everything. The Bible is the inerrant word of God. Well, now we're having a problem, and this is something I think people need to work through, these irreconcilable differences, to understand their own worldview better.
Yeah, and um, as a person who is a believer, I'm certainly, as you've gotten to know me, not a traditional or conventional believer, and it is precisely many of the exact same objections that atheists would have that are the reason why I have found a faith that addresses those problems that I see going on rampant and abusively and ridiculously and absurdly within certain kinds of belief systems. So yeah, the odd thing is that I find myself, even though a believer, far more empathetic with the with the complaints of the atheist than I am with the claims of the theist.
And I again, I think that the reason I promote this particular book is because I think that there's value in the thought process behind it. And I'm not saying that these questions are devastating to Christian theology, and I
Mhm.
don't think that that's what Mr.
Yeah.
Harrison is saying in the
I've
book
never
either.
read
It's
it,
just
so I'm
things that,
curious to hear kind of spontaneously what some of these other questions might be. I'm just kind of curious how I fit into it, and maybe I'm indulging myself, but
well,
but
here's
you
another
know me
fun
well
one
enough
that,
that you might be able to pick out questions you think would be workable, or questions you think we could both laugh with.
well, here's a fun one for you because I know that this one is not particularly applicable to you, but I think we can both get a chuckle about how applicable it really is. Is have you actually read the Bible?
you
I
know,
like that one.
uh, and a lot of people who've had it in front of their eyes haven't really read it. But yeah, certainly not for comprehension. Many, when you read anything with a attitude towards already embracing it before you even know what it says, you already are. Oh, what's the word? You're already inebriated. You're already in trouble.
Well, the other part of that question, I think, is that the very obvious. A lot of people just the answer to that is no, regardless of whether they were reading it for comprehension or just reading it, is that the answer for probably the majority of Christians in America, at least,
You
is
certainly haven't read
no.
all of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I've read parts of the Bible, I've read scripture. Of course, I know bits and pieces, but have I read the whole thing? Well, no. Don't be silly. Do you have
You know,
any idea how long the Bible is? I mean,
I remember one time I got myself into a little bit of trouble with a Jewish believer once when I gave them a passage from Isaiah 53 to read. And they actually accused me of cutting a page out of the New Testament and putting it in the Old Testament. And without regard to what was really going on there in the text or anything, but that showed me that this was a person who, although they were of the Jewish faith, they'd never read through their own text. They didn't recognize it. And
Yeah, and there's a
to
huge amount of that.
hello again, I couldn't quite hear you. We cut off.
I said there's a huge amount of that, and it's particularly ironic given that as an atheist, I've read the Bible, and I don't believe it to be the Word of God in any way. But I think that if something really was, if I considered it to be the word of some divine entity trying to communicate with me, that would probably be near the top of my priorities list.
Yeah. You think you'd want to read it? As a person who has studied linguistics, I have a very similar gasping. I just can't explain it. How can people believe this is the word of God and they don't even want to know what words really are? It just that baffles me beyond all belief, and how they can even reject the paradigm of linguistic anthropology and the study of language, particularly since they not only believe that this Bible is the word of God, they know this Bible is written in dead languages. You'd think, well, let's study the way of peering into a dead language so that we
Well,
can really
guy,
be
he
experts
is
at
online.
understanding the notions of a dead language, and they don't do that. They just, to me, um, I don't get it. I don't want to make fun of them, and I don't want to, but to me, it is like, I don't know, when do I begin to say, look, maybe you're just being disingenuous, and we don't want to be honest about it or something. I don't
Bob,
know.
I need
I
to
find
cut you
it.
off here for a second. Guy has signed in on Skype, so
Oh,
Joey,
awesome.
can we try to get connected with him?
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah.
Greg,
Yes.
I if you see Guy online, I don't because he hasn't approved my Skype request. So the only way that we could get him online is if we took a break and you dealt with that because I can't communicate. Well, I could try to communicate with him over Skype, but since he hasn't approved my request, it might be troublesome. So if you want to kind of communicate with him and get him to approve the request, I'll call him while you guys are talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or while you're doing that, maybe I could just hum.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, talking to
That's
Greg. By
that's
the
the
way,
best you can do, Bob.
Well, here, let me give
hmm,
you another question to chat about.
sure.
You're good at this one, so let's see. I'll give you three. Take your pick. What do prophecies prove? Is Christianity good for women? And um, hmm.
Okay, what do prophecies prove? Is Christianity good for women? And what's the third?
And
Give me a
could we
third.
design a better world? This would be the argument from fine tuning or intelligent design. So I'll let you sort of get
Okay,
the
the last question,
humanist
say it
side
again,
of
because
it.
I think I cut you off.
So there's the humanist argument of is it good for women? There's the theological argument of what do prophecies prove? Or there is the argument from design here. Uh, is the universe fine tuned for us, or could we have designed a better world? Is it this the best possible world that we would expect from an intelligent designer? Go.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me address the last one first. Is this the best possible world? I don't know how anyone could ever even know that. We have no idea how a different world would work. And it reminds me of the that old Chinese story of the guy who says that, oh no, we had a bad storm last night and the fence got broken and we had several horses that escaped. And someone says, oh, that's bad. Well, not really, because my sons went out and they found the horses and they found them with a bunch of other wild horses, brought them back, and now we have like 5 times as many horses as we used to have. Oh, well, that's good. Well, I don't know if that was really good because one of my sons was trying to train one of the stallions there, and he fell off and he broke his leg. And oh, that's terrible. Well, I don't know if that's really that terrible because the army just came through taking able-bodied people and they couldn't take my son. Well, that's good. Well, maybe not. He might have won the war. And so I think that there's a sense in which we don't really know what's really working well and what's not working well in terms of that kind of an evaluation. So, is this the best of all possible worlds? Could we have designed a better one? I really don't think we even have the capacity to deal with such a question. So, I kind of see I kind of see it as playing with ideas that just don't work. But as far as is Christianity good for women? Certainly not in its tradition. I think that Christianity, in many ways, has maintained and sustained a great deal of the social problems that are part of the biases. I personally get the impression that Paul knew, the Apostle Paul knew that he didn't want human rights to become a sidetracking issue that would derail his message. And so I think that he tried to pull a fast one. He tried to use the concept of love to address husbands and wives and how they ought to treat each other. And he used that concept within the paradigm of their current arrangement, but in a way that would cause it to fall apart in its inequality. And I think that some people miss that. I think he was trying to pull a fast one, just like with slavery. I think he says, the slave owners were to love their slaves as brothers in the Lord, and by the time you're done, if you take a look at what he's asking them to do, there's just no way the slavery could continue in a sense. But at the same time, he doesn't have to come out and be so culturally radical as to say, let's get rid of this slavery and this inequality of women. But and I think there's a lot of ways in which the text has been messed with to maintain an abuse of women. So has Christianity been good for women? I say no. No, it hasn't. And of course, that first one. Let's see, what was that? I can't remember now. What was that first question?
The first one was, what do prophecies prove?
Oh, prophecy. Yeah, right. What does prophecy prove? I I think I feel mixed about this. I don't I don't dismiss the possibility of prophecy, but I don't see prophecy as all that miraculous. First of all, if there is a God, I can't see how it would be impossible that this God would know that there's certain things he's going to make sure come about at a certain point in time. And that's not really all that remarkable, that he could do something like that. Nor is it all that remarkable that an intelligent person could not tell where certain social dynamics are headed and where they're going. So, in some sense, something that might seem like prophecy is really just a clear understanding of where all these dynamics are going to come to a head. And so there's a sense in which there's that. I also think that another aspect of prophecy in Scripture is that I think that some of the Scripture was written at a point in time after certain events happened, and written as if it was written prior to those events. And they're really just fudging it to try to give the text an apparent, oh my, look at that. They said this way, and it happened, and it was, So I think that some of it is really just smoke and mirrors in the text, to be honest with you. So that I suppose that when you get done with it all, I see a mixed bag of both problems and non-problems with the issue of prophecy.
I have to say that Guy has a chapter in his book, 50 Popular Beliefs That People Think Are True. I was reading over the last week here, brushing back up. It's specifically about Nostradamus. And what I think is interesting is the idea of prophecy, what prophecy is and what it isn't. And frankly, it's an art form. Now, I think that you're absolutely right. There are prophecies that were written after the fact, but even a prophecy written after the fact, written to matter of fact, is going to be a failed prophecy. If, say, let's go with Harold Camping from last year,
particularly
saying
when we discover what the real history is.
Yeah, right. Well, even if we say that we know the real history, if I start to write prophecies now, and then fraudulently hide them, or say I discovered them, prophecies that were 4,000 years old and prophesied very specifically that a man named George Washington is going to be the first president of the United States that will become, I could give a very list of very specific prophecies, and everybody would go, that's a hoax, because that kind of stuff sets our whistles, our alarms going. And it's funny how that works.
It's
we're
also
all natural skeptics there.
To me, that's too deterministic. And to be honest with you, I see determinism as something that's interpreted from the text, but I do not see the text of the Bible as actually taking a deterministic view. And the prophecies, or some of the things that are called prophecies are really just phrases that are not prophecies. They're just phrases that we found that we could kind of draw a parallel with, and we call it a prophecy. Well, wonderful. To me, that's grabbing at stiffer straws.
Well, and I think that we need to recognize that, again, as prophecy being an art form, it's best when it's vague and when it can be interpreted loosely, and that's where I think, and again, Mr. Harris thinks that there is staying power behind Guy P. Harrison. I'm sorry, the Guy P. Harrison says that there is staying power behind what Nostradamus said, more than even what he says, that it's going to be more influential throughout time because it's fun. It's an interesting way of Have
you ever read Nostradamus?
I've read a little bit. I think it's interesting that they're in quatrains, and because of the poetic nature of it, it makes it goofy and fun to say, well, look, this could be interpreted to say that. Wouldn't that be cool? And that's the best thing about a good prophecy, is well written to apply to just about any situation that is even remotely similar to what's being talked about. I mean, the best way to write a prophecy is to make it so that anybody could go, yeah, it's just like writing a fortune cookie. You write it so it applies to everybody in every situation.
There will be bad days in your future.
Yes, absolutely.
That's it.
We have some viewer comments here that I wanted to cover. This one specifically is about alternative medicine. Again, he covers that in his book. Specifically talks about alternative medicine, and homeopathy gets its own chapter. But it says alternative medicine was used by Steve Jobs for his pancreatic cancer initially.
Yeah.
And then Steve Jobs survived for about 5 years with devastating cancer. So something had to work. Not all alternative medicine is wrong, but everything needs to be tested and verified. And that I would agree that not all alternative medicine is wrong, but I would say that by definition, and this is a paraphrase of Tim Minchin, alternative medicine has either not been proved to work or been proved not to work. Medicine that has been proved to work is called medicine, not
Yes.
alternative medicine. So
I,
I think
by the
that
way, that last video that you showed of Tim Minchin, I went back, and of course you started at a certain point where his song began, but
oh yeah,
I went back and
his
watched the
intro to
whole
that is great.
video, and let me tell you,
I
that
want to get him
guy
on the
is
show
a
too.
riot, and he's
The
extremely clever. I like him a lot. Yeah.
That video, by the way, viewers, is if you go on YouTube and Tim Minchin, Minchin, it's called, I believe the song is "Thank You God,"
Yes.
but it's also Sam's mom is what it's in, and it's just
Yeah.
a wonderful satire of this situation. I love it,
His setup
and
for
it's
it was awesome.
that's another one of the things that this author talks about in his books is how um, how people believe that prayers are answered and that Jesus heals things. And I mean, I wanted to address very specifically about the alternative medicine here, though, is Steve Jobs had a very curable form of pancreatic cancer that had he not uh, avoided traditional medicine, and by traditional I mean medicine, in the way that he did for as long as he did, he would have been far more likely to survive. Now, we can't say that he would have survived because it's not a testable hypothesis at this point, but he specifically avoided it and opted mainly for dietary differences. And that was it, hoping that his body would cope with cancer on its own. And while that is potentially possible, and certainly are spontaneous reversals known within cancer, there's nobody that knows why they happen. And just a healthy diet has never been linked to reversing cancer in that way. So what he did was take a huge risk, and he died. And it's probably related to that. Had Steve Jobs made the, I guess, more scientific approach, or taking the more scientific approach of maybe even doing both, he may be around today to make a erroneous accreditation to his survival to this naturopathic medicine, because people
Greg,
tend to forget the other side of it. But
Gregory,
Hey,
yes.
sorry to interrupt, but I have your guest on with us.
awesome.
Oh, excellent. Hello,
Speak to him.
Mr.
Hi.
Harrison. Guy, how should I refer to you?
Oh, just Guy is fine. How are you?
Guy, I am wonderful, and I apologize for not communicating things. I realized that I had sent the wrong time zone when I had
Oh,
originally
okay. Yeah, I
said it.
was
So
confused. You said the show's on now, and I thought I was early, but I guess I'm late, so sorry. Yeah.
it's my fault. I think I had said Central Standard Time, which would be an hour behind where I'm at because it's daylight savings time. I forgot about that
Gotcha.
difference, so I apologize
Well,
for
I'll
that.
talk extra fast to make up for the lost time, okay?
Well, we've
There
been
you go.
talking about your work through the show here. I gave an intro, and it was beautifully worded, of course, to talk about what you have been doing, and the books that have been so influential to me. And I think that everybody should be reading. These are the books that I buy copies of to give out to people that might be skeptical, because your books are so approachable and for people who just have questions, and they're not Richard Dawkins coming out here and saying, "Listen, fool, you need to not be doing this." So, what inspired you to write these books, and in the way that you wrote them?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, that was the goal of my writing, is to try to actually reach people, help people, and not be obnoxious about it. Um, I think the motivation for these kinds of books that I've been writing, I'm on my fifth one now, just finished my fifth one, is because it's very simple. I care about the world. I've traveled, I've been to every continent except Antarctica. I've met all kinds of people, all kind of religious people, all kind of non-believers. I've seen a lot. And I'm sort of, I have this long interest in poverty. And I've interviewed many people who just live in extreme poverty, the kind of poverty most people don't see. You know,
Mm.
I've seen children living in these conditions, and I've also seen many things that just disgusted me, broke my heart. People abusing one another, abusing themselves, people squandering their intellectual potential, people just voluntarily throwing away the beauty of their lives, the real, the joy you can get from being all you can be, sorry for the phrase. But, and all those things kind of led me to think, we can do better than this. I don't think we can make a perfect world. I don't think we're ever going to be a perfect species by any means. We're always going to have problems. We're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to be stupid. But we can do a hell of a lot better than what we're doing right now, okay? So I try, and I think one of the main, there are many reasons, but one of the main reasons that we're doing such a bad job still in the 21st century of just living and getting along is because we're not skeptical enough. It's a huge issue. We don't think clearly. We don't ask questions. We don't ask for evidence. We accept too much too easily. And this is a massive problem. It's a crisis, a global crisis, but it's almost completely off the radar. Politicians don't talk about it. Parents don't bring it up. Teachers rarely mention it. Few teachers do. And so I'm just trying to communicate my idea to the world that, if you have this little force field of skepticism around you, it doesn't mean you're a jerk. It doesn't mean you're mean. It doesn't suck the joy out of life. None of that. All it does is make you safer and set you up to live a more efficient life and to just get more out of whatever you're trying to do in life. And it also makes it, if you're a good skeptic, it makes you much, much, much less likely to want to hate somebody or hurt somebody or harm yourself for irrational reasons, unproven claims, or just plain stupidity. Okay, it still might happen. Okay, but it just puts you in a better spot, a better position in life to lead a safer, more sensible, efficient life, one that is also more gentle and kind to others.
I couldn't have said that better myself. I have to say that you were a big inspiration for why I wanted to get more active in making the statements and bringing this about. I think that there's a lot out there that needs to be said and needs to be promoted. And my primary goal with this show and our primary goal here at the New Covenant Group is to promote rational thinking, even if some of the people in the New Covenant Group, like my co-host Bob, which I have not had the opportunity to introduce you to Bob yet, that he's a Christian. So obviously not entirely rational. I'm just kidding. But he goes by the moniker the Unconventional Pastor. And he and I were discussing some of the questions that you asked in your book, 50 questions that are for every Christian.
50,
is what the
50 simple questions for every Christian.
50 simple questions, yes.
Yeah. Because I'm a simple guy.
Well, I mean, they're great. What I love about the questions in that is that they're not necessarily questions that, normally as an atheist, when I'm approaching a Christian with something, I'm looking for gotcha type questions that are going to make this stump them. But these ones I think are just valid questions that people need to think about and chew on and consider on their own if they haven't done so yet, because it's valuable either to help them understand their faith better or to help them transition from it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the point of the book. I say right up front, this book is not an argument. It's not picking a fight with Christians. It's not trying necessarily even to deconvert them or pull them away from their faith. Nothing like that. This book should be viewed by Christians as something they need to read because they need to understand what's going on, what's really going on in the minds of people who are skeptical of Christianity. Because, look, like it or not, they live in a world where 2 out of every 3 people on the planet are not Christian. Okay, for some reason, for a variety of reasons, those people are not convinced that Christianity is true. Now, most of those people are just raised in another religion, and that's that. But a lot of people, probably 1 billion people, know all about Christianity and maybe even considered it, but they weren't convinced. They were skeptical. And these are just the root, basic, simple questions that pop up in the minds of skeptics and stop them short of accepting Christianity. And Christians need to understand these because there's so much nonsense going on in Christianity as to how they view non-Christians. I mean, the prejudice is just ridiculous. I mean, people, I cite a bunch of studies in the book just to demonstrate how bad it really is. And one I found, for example, said that a significant number of people who believe in a God in America associate atheists with criminals and even rapists at a rate far higher than they would with other unpopular groups, say, Muslims or feminists or neo-Nazis or whatever. So atheists, and poll after poll finds that Christians in America are much less likely to vote for an atheist than they would a gay person, even though many of them have problems with gay people, or even a Muslim candidate, even after 9/11 and all the prejudice that Muslims face from Christians, they're still much better off than an atheist. And an atheist, I mean, they think that typical Christian thinks an atheist, and not all, I'm not saying all Christians, okay? Many Christians, not all. They think that an atheist is somebody who's angry at God, who has rebelled. They know God's real, but they're just fighting against God. Or it's somebody who is just immoral and has this, just filled with lust and wants to do drugs and run around in the streets. So therefore they feel they must reject religion and call themselves an atheist so they can do all these bad things and not be,
You're suppressing truth
and
and unrighteousness, basically. Yeah.
yeah. And so what I'm trying to do with this book is just kind of pull the curtain back and say, look, let's be honest about this. These are the real reasons. These are the reasons people aren't buying it. When you come and say, hey, Christianity is the best thing ever, you got to get on board. This is great. Well, these questions immediately pop up in the minds of people. Many Christians have had these same questions. The chapter 1 is, does this even make any sense? And it's just a basic claim of Christianity about the Son of God or God himself, the Holy Trinity thing, coming to earth, having to be sacrificed in this kind of barbaric human sacrifice type thing in order to save us from God who is saving us from him, from his wrath, So it's kind of bizarre, and we're all flawed and sinful and doomed to hell just by being born when he created us, just these basic, simple questions. And I present them in a way not to argue, not to debate, not to say, I got you, in a corner here, this doesn't make sense. It's not. It's just saying, look, this is what we're thinking about. You need to respect this and understand it so we can all get along better. Because a big problem with the whole atheist Christianity thing, atheist religion in general thing, is it's portrayed as this big war between two kinds of people. But we're not really two kinds of people. We're all just people. It's just some of us are more skeptical than others. Some of us take our skepticism further than others. That's all it is. I mean, some of the best skeptics I know are Christians, okay? If you put a Quran in front of them, they rip it apart. They're fantastic skeptics, but they stop when it comes to their religion. And I just try to point out things like that and just show that, and I mean, this probably will upset a lot of atheists, but I even have a chapter in there. I say, look, you want to be a skeptic, even if you're a Christian. I don't care if you're a Bob Jones University graduate, Oral Roberts loving, snake handling Christian that just thinks, absolutely the world is 6,000 years old. You're just the absolute fundamentalist. You're a classic fundamentalist Christian. Well, guess what? I still encourage you to be a good skeptic. Okay, fine. If you feel you can't let go of your God and your religion, all right, that's it's your choice. I'm not here to force anything on you, but I'm still going to try to convince you that you want to be a good skeptic, because I don't care about religious people any less than I care about non-religious people. They still need to be They still need to protect themselves from con artists and scam artists and the medical quackery, people that want to rip them off. They still need to think critically. Christians shouldn't be wasting their money on astrology and psychics no more than anybody else. So, skepticism is something that's for everyone. And just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you should say, I don't like that critical thinking stuff. I don't like that skepticism. Because look, you want as much of it as you can handle. So I'm saying, grab onto this. You want it, no matter who you are and what you believe.
So Bob,
it's kind of funny hearing him say that, because I went to Bob Jones. And I
sorry about that.
Sorry. I was enjoying that. And I totally agree with you. In fact, the reason why they call me the unconventional pastor is because I asked a lot of these questions, and I found that I could not accept my own Christianity on those terms or through that kind of a lens. And it, it took me into a totally different direction. But I started out as a very fundamentalist pastor, and it really fell apart for me when I had to ask the honest questions. I found a place of faith that really had to give a different explanation for why Jesus is here and what this is all about. That didn't include his coming to save me from his father, who just thought I was a piece of crap, and so basically I became a person who rejected Western tradition of Christianity without necessarily rejecting the possibility that this entire story could be seen in a different way, and if it hadn't been for that, I think that I would not be able to hold on to it at all, you know.
Yeah, that's a trend. Many people are like that. I know many Christians who, they may respect the Bible, but they absolutely do not view it as an accurate historical record of the past or as a guidebook for today. It's just
Right.
got too much stuff in
That would
it
be
that's
me. Yeah.
outdated. Yeah, and their view on God or Jesus is simply that, I kind of choose to believe this. I want to believe it, and I'm not even going to bother trying to prove every aspect of it because I don't think I can. But and
Exactly.
I in a way I have a lot more respect for that because while some might call it a bit wishy-washy, I think it's more honest because it's almost like there's a hope that there is a heaven. There's a hope that there's this God who cares about me. And what's wrong with hope? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all need that. So I appreciate that because the problem is, and why I try to encourage people to have doubt. There's nothing wrong with doubt. Doubt will keep you from hating gay people or thinking that if you're a man that you're the boss of a woman just because you're a man. All these kind of things that religions tend to sanction and encourage and excuse. I mean, if you have some doubt, then maybe you might be a better human being. Go ahead and keep your belief, but don't be so absolutely confident that you really think that you can just treat other people, any way you want, as long as you can justify it with your ancient book. I mean, that's where the
Yeah.
problems come in. And Christians
I
know
think
this.
that. Yeah.
They know this. They look at fundamentalist Muslims and they can point out all the wrong things they're doing and how they're gone astray and all, and they shouldn't be so confident in this book and all that. I mean, they know this. They just don't. The fundamentalists, Christians, just don't apply it to themselves.
So, Guy, we have about 4 to 5 minutes left, and I wanted to say you said you just finished your fifth book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That comes out in November, right?
Yeah, October, November. It's loved writing this one. It's called Think: Why You Should Question Everything, and it's a book that originally I was going to write it for younger people, but then I decided, I feel like it's good for everybody. So it's an adult book, but it's appropriate for high school kids too. What it is, it explains in real plain English how you can be a good skeptic and how you can think like a scientist in everyday life. Like I mentioned earlier, just to give yourself a better shot at having a safer life, a more efficient life, not wasting time, not wasting money, not putting your health at risk, not making mistakes just because you're a weak skeptic. And I also have chapters about how to eat well, just so that your brain is healthy, how to stay active so that your brain works well, because there's some real good cutting edge science that's showing what you need to do to make sure your brain is working properly. So it's kind of a manual for thinkers and skeptics and people who just want to have good healthy brains that work well for them. And it's also I've got a chapter in there about how you don't need to rely on things like astrology or psychic readings or all these things, cryptozoology, all these things that they're exciting on the surface, but they really end up kind of being hollow at the end of the day. And I say, you know what? The real universe, the real world, the real humankind is fascinating enough. There's so much that we've discovered thanks to science, thanks to the scientific process. There's so much that we've discovered. It's just astounding, you know? I mean, and then when you add to that the excitement of the anticipation of what's around the corner, what more are we going to discover? You know, you don't know. We could be the generation who makes contact with extraterrestrial life. You know, if it's out there, it might, maybe we will be. Who knows? There's so many things, inventions that are coming, just developments. You know, and I'm a bit optimistic, yes, but I really think that reality and once you get just, you know, you'll never comprehend it all, but if you just scratch the surface of the real world, the real universe, and understand some of it, you start to, it's infectious. You get hooked on it and you think, my gosh, you know, reality really does rock.
Well, there's one point in there that I'm going to have to disagree with you, but as an Aries, of course, it makes sense that I'm going to disagree with a Libra. No, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that. I think that what you're doing is a great service, and these books have been fantastic to read, and I've been encouraging as many other people as I can. I do have to ask the new book, since I haven't had the privilege yet. Is it laid out like your other 50 Reasons type, where one of my favorite things about those is people can pick it up, read a chapter, and put it back down to come back to it if they're not comfortable reading through it. They don't need a full and complete. It's not like you have to read the entire book to understand any particular point.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be read in progression. You can just flip around those books, find the chapters that appeal to you, and read them. And I kept them short. You know, they're only like 4 or 5 pages each chapter, so it's highly readable. This book is not exactly like that, but it kind of is. It's 5 chapters, but each one is broken up into many subdivisions. So in a way, I've made it even more readable and inviting for the eyes. You know, it's broken up into real good categories and all, because the whole process of writing, I kept thinking, okay, if I was a junior in high school and I've got, you know, video games to play and girls to call up and flirt with, am I going to really spend any time reading this? What's going to pull me in? And that's kind of what I was thinking. It's not a book for kids, but that's what I was thinking. I want it to be really, really easy to read because there's some complex stuff in there. But I hope, my goal is that, you know, my attempt was to present it in a way that would just be, you know, fun for anybody to read and really, really useful. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff in there that I hope will allow people to improve their lives, you know, without being gimmicky. I don't say, I mentioned nutrition for the brain and all. I don't say, here's the wonder milkshake, you know, mix this up and drink it 3 times a day and I promise your IQ will go up. It's not like that. I'm talking about how to make your body healthy and keep your brain healthy by just basic proper nutrition, a few little things based on some recent discoveries, but it's nothing, you know, hokey in that way, but it's very readable. So I'm glad you like that in the other books. I hope this one will be the same.
Well, thank you for joining us. We are just about all out of time. I wanted to give you actually, I want to say, Bob, is there anything else that you had today? I'm sorry I dominated the conversation, but I was excited for this
No,
one.
that's fine. No, I'm glad. I wish we could have Guy come back sometime and talk a little bit more about some of his other books, and also give an opportunity to talk about how people can find them and his website or his blog and stuff like that. So we want to have him come back sometime when we can really deal with that. And just to say that I'm very happy that he has contributed a very kind and nicely inspirited contribution to this dialogue. And unfortunately, sometimes, you know, we Christians, we can be extremely difficult people to get along with, and I'm, in some ways, I'm kind of I'm on the lucky side, because when I have to talk to atheists as a believer, most of them are just very nice people.
Bob, I'm going to cut you off on
Yeah.
that point because it's a good one to cut you off on it. But Guy, I wanted to give you the opportunity to have a last word. We got Joey's telling me, my producer, that we're out of time, but I'm going to give you another minute to talk entirely on your own. And thank you for joining us.
Well, first of all, thanks. I feel like I shortchanged you on time, so I would love to come back. Just let me know anytime. People can read more about my books on Amazon. I have an author page. Just do a search, Guy P. Harrison. I also have a website. It's guypharrison.com. P as in Paul. You know, I'll be happy to come back anytime, you guys. You have a good show. I respect and appreciate what you're trying to do. And, you know, I hope people will check out this last book, 50 Simple Questions for Every Christian, because what it is. I'm just trying to close the gap and lessen misunderstanding between Christians and non-believers, okay? Because we all have to share this planet. We all got to get along. It doesn't make sense that we pretend we're in some kind of war against each other, because whether we like it or not, we're here together. We need to get along. And that's what
Right.
this book is trying to do. It's just trying to explain why there are non-Christians. Why isn't everybody a Christian? This book helps explain why.
Well, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you back in the future, and this time I'll make sure I communicate the time properly.
No problem, man. Anytime. Easy mistake.
Excellent.
I'll be happy to come back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and
Sure.
thank you, viewers, for sticking around for Inspiring Honesty. Join us again next week, and stay tuned for the Unconventional Pastor coming up next.